I came home on Christmas Eve with one duffel bag, an honorable discharge, and the kind of exhaustion you can't sleep off. 14 years in Army intelligence will do that to you. My plan was simple. Take a few weeks at my parents' place in Brighton Ridge, catch my breath, figure out what the next version of my life looked like. It wasn't a big ask. I hadn't seen them much during deployments, and I thought maybe the holidays would soften everyone up. Wishful thinking on my part. The second I stepped onto their porch, reality slapped me harder than any drill sergeant ever did. The Christmas lights were perfect, of course. My mother treated December like a competitive sport, and she'd always aimed for gold. The porch smelled like cinnamon and some overpriced candle trying to imitate a pine forest. I knocked, expecting at least a polite hello. Instead, my dad opened the door with the enthusiasm of a man receiving divorce papers. He looked me over from boots to collar, taking in the uniform I still hadn't changed out of. "Caroline," he said, like he was reading my name off a spam email. No hug, not even a half-decent fake smile, just my name, flat and annoyed, as if my arrival inconvenienced the roast in the oven. Behind him, I spotted my sister Lydia holding her phone vertically, already filming, not even pretending she wasn't. She had on one of those holiday sweaters that cost as much as rent in some states, and she was smiling like she'd won something. "Look who finally decided to show up," she said. "Did the Army run out of sandboxes?" Classic Lydia. Always quick, always petty, always convinced the world existed to give her good lighting. I stepped inside, ignoring the phone pointed at my face. "I just need to stay here a couple of weeks," I said. "I need time to figure things out." My mother appeared from the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel and avoiding eye contact like it was her New Year's resolution. "Caroline, we talked about this," she said. "You can't just drop in and expect everything to pause for you." "We talked?" I asked. "When?" "I left you a voicemail 2 days ago." "Yes," she said, "and we heard it, but you've been gone for years. You chose the military. We chose stability. Right. Because nothing screams stability like ignoring your daughter's phone calls for a decade while bragging to your friends about her service." Lydia pushed her phone closer. "Should I livestream this? People love these real emotional moments. Authentic content. They eat it up." I looked at her. "Put the phone away." She grinned wider. "Make me." My dad stepped forward. "This isn't your home anymore, Caroline. You can't just show up whenever life gets hard and expect us to fix it." For the record, I'd never once asked them to fix anything. Not when I slept 2 hours a night in Afghanistan. Not when I lost 2 friends on a mission nobody will ever talk about. Not when a military therapist suggested I take time off, because apparently waking up in a cold sweat every night wasn't the hallmark of a stable mind. "I just need somewhere to stay," I said quietly. "A short time. That's it." My mother shook her head. "We're not doing this. Not again." "Again?" I repeated. "I haven't been home since 2017. She lifted her chin like she was preparing for a jury. "This is a peaceful house. We don't need chaos. I've a never wises. Chaos. That's what she thought I brought. Never mind Lydia, who once set a kitchen towel on fire trying to make popcorn. Or my dad, who'd had a midlife crisis loud enough for the HOA to file complaints. No, the real chaos was the daughter who served her country too long and came home tired." Dad stepped aside and pointed toward the driveway. "You can take your things and go." Tonight. It was 10 degrees outside, snow coming down hard enough to erase footprints in seconds. I stared at them, waiting for someone to laugh, to blink, to give any indication this was some dark, badly timed joke. No one did. "Are you serious?" I asked. My dad didn't answer with words. He grabbed my duffel bag, walked onto the porch, and dropped it in the snow. Just dropped it, like he was taking out the trash. My mom folded her arms. Lydia zoomed in on my face, loving every second. "This is going to get so many views," she whispered to her phone. "A soldier without a home. Story time, guys. Buckle up." I stepped outside and picked up my bag. Snow clung to the fabric. My hands shook, and not just from the cold. They watched from the doorway, a perfect little family tableau. Mother, father, daughter, none of them understanding the meaning of the word. "Good luck, Caroline," my mother said, with a tone usually reserved for waiters who forgot her order. Lydia leaned in, still filming. "Merry Christmas, sis. Hope you enjoy the hike. Dad closed the door. The lock clicked. The porch lights flicked off. And that was it. 14 years of service, a lifetime of trying to make them proud, erased by a single deadbolt. I walked down the driveway, the snow crunching under my boots. The cold pierced straight through the uniform, and I tried to focus on my breathing the way military therapists taught me. Slow inhale, slow exhale. Pretend everything is fine until it actually is. Brighton Ridge looked exactly like a Christmas card. Perfect houses, perfect lights, perfect families sitting inside, drinking cocoa while I dragged my duffel bag toward the park like some rejected extra from a holiday movie. I found a bench under a flickering street lamp and sat. My fingers were numb, my toes burned. The wind kept pushing snow against my legs, stacking it like the universe was trying to cover me up and be done with it. I leaned back and tried to remind myself that I'd survived worse. Sandstorms, mortar fire, budget meetings. A little Colorado winter wasn't going to kill me, but exhaustion doesn't care about bravado. My eyes stung, my throat tightened. For a moment, I felt like I'd been dropped back into that night overseas when everything went wrong and I realized how fast things fall apart. I rubbed my hands together, trying to get feeling back, when I noticed movement in the corner of my vision. A figure coming down the sidewalk. Slow, uneven steps. No shoes. Just bare feet on the ice. The kind of thing you only see when someone is one bad break away from disappearing altogether. She got closer, and I could see her face turning a worrying shade of purple. Her hair was gray, messy, and stuck to her cheek. Her jacket was thin, more decorative than functional. She hugged herself like she was trying to hold the pieces together. I stood up without thinking. That's the one thing the army hammered so deep into my bones I don't even question it anymore. If someone's in trouble, you move. Ma'am, are you okay? I asked. She looked at me, confused for half a second, then tried to smile like everything was fine. It wasn't. My instinct was immediate. I pulled off my coat, the only warm thing I had, and wrapped it around her shoulders. She started to protest, but I cut her off. You need it more than I do. The wind gusted hard enough to sting my face, but her breathing eased just a little. She nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement between two people who didn't owe each other anything but decency. And that is where everything began shifting, piece by piece, in ways I didn't understand yet, sitting on that frozen bench, with snow piling up around my boots. The cold cut deeper the moment I stepped back from her, like my body finally realized it had just surrendered the only real insulation I had left. My breath came out in sharp little bursts, fogging the air as I watched her steady herself inside my coat. For a second, she looked like she wasn't sure whether to thank me or collapse. I didn't blame her. Bare feet on a Colorado sidewalk in December wasn't a lifestyle choice. She tried to speak, but the words came out thin. Shelters full? I didn't want to tell her the truth because hearing it out loud made everything feel heavier. Yeah, they've been full since last week. The holidays brought out the best in some people and the worst in circumstances. Anyone who didn't have a roof usually couldn't find one this time of year. Snow kept drifting down in wide, lazy flakes, building up in her hair. I brushed some off before thinking whether she'd mind. She didn't flinch. She just gave me a small, tired nod like she'd already lived 10 different versions of nights worse than this one. Maybe she had. Her feet were blotched purple, and every instinct in me screamed to get her off the ground. Somewhere warm. I scanned the street. Empty. Brighton Ridge was one of those towns where sidewalks turned into ghost zones after 8. Everyone inside enjoying cocoa and family time, except the 2 soldiers standing out here pretending they weren't freezing. I crouched beside her feet. You're losing circulation. That's not something you walk off. She gave a soft grunt of acknowledgement, the kind that said she knew exactly how bad things were but didn't have the energy to argue about it. I heard sirens in the distance, faint but growing closer. Not the frantic type, steady, measured. Maybe someone had called 911. Maybe some neighbor looked out their window and saw 2 women who clearly didn't belong in a scene from a snow globe. You should sit, I said. She didn't resist. I guided her to the bench, the same one I'd been shivering on minutes earlier. The metal was cold enough to violate the Geneva Conventions. Still, she lowered herself with surprising control, like she was measuring the angle without thinking. A muscle memory move. Training leaves fingerprints on a person long after the uniform comes off. Up close, Her eyes had that 1,000-yard look I recognized all too well. Not drugged, not confused, just tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from missing sleep. The kind that builds over years when the world you served decides it's done with you. You served, I said, not making it a question. One corner of her mouth twitched. Long time ago. Army? Close enough. Her voice had the grit of someone who'd yelled over helicopter blades more than once. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. People with stories like ours rarely start by sharing their resume. The sirens grew louder, then softened as the vehicles slowed. 2 emergency vans, 1 ambulance, one with county outreach markings, turned the corner and rolled to a stop near the sidewalk. Their headlights cut through the snow, lighting up everything in a hard, honest glow. A paramedic hopped out first, bundled up like he'd learned his lesson the hard way one winter. He approached us slower than expected, hands visible, voice calm. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The woman didn't answer. I did. "She needs heat and medical evaluation. She's showing signs of hypothermia." He nodded like that confirmed what he'd already suspected. Another paramedic brought a blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. She didn't resist when they helped her to her feet, though her legs wobbled like she'd forgotten how knees worked. They guided her toward the ambulance, and she gave me a look over her shoulder, brief, focused, carrying more gratitude than her voice probably could have handled. I lifted a hand in return. Not a wave, just acknowledgement. Soldier to soldier. As they loaded her up, a third figure walked toward me, bundled in a dark county jacket with a clipboard tucked under one arm. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't unfriendly either. Neutral, professional. "Are you Caroline Mercer?" she asked. Hearing my name jolted me. Nobody outside my family even knew I was in town. "Yeah. How do you know that?" She glanced back at the ambulance, then at me. "The woman you helped told us to find you," she insisted. "As 9, I blinked. She didn't even know my name. "Well," the staffer said, "she does now." She tore a page from her clipboard and handed it to me. Not a business card, something closer to an intake form. At the top, a logo, BVI Brooks Veterans Initiative. I'd heard the name before through military channels. They ran reintegration programs, housing, crisis response, good reputation, tough love approach. "She said to tell you, thank you," the staffer added. "And that you should come by tomorrow morning. She wants to see you." I stared at the paper. A date, a time, an address. No explanation. The staffer began heading back to the vehicles. She was very clear about it. "If you can make it, you should." The ambulance doors shut. The engine hummed. In a moment, the lights faded as the vehicles pulled away, leaving the street silent, except for the whisper of falling snow. I looked down at the coatless sleeves of my uniform and rubbed my arms to keep the heat in. The cold had worked its way into everything, bones included, but something else sat underneath it now. A pull, a direction. Not something mystical or dramatic, more like the sense you get during deployment when you know the next 24 hours are going to matter whether you're ready or not. Snow kept settling on the bench, smoothing over the mess I'd made of the seat earlier. I picked up my duffel bag again, the straps stiff with ice, and started walking. Each breath hurt a little, but the ache in my chest had changed shape, less about the door that had closed behind me, more about the unexpected knock from whatever was coming next. The town stayed quiet while I moved through it, lights glowing in windows of people who still believed the holidays were about peace and togetherness. I didn't hold it against them. Not everyone gets the luxury of a normal December. Some of us inherit a different set of traditions. Being prepared, staying alert, reading the shadows on a street even when it's supposed to be festive. By the time I reached the motel, my fingers felt like they'd been replaced with wooden dowels. I fumbled with the key card twice before getting the door open. The heater inside groaned like it hated its job but did it anyway. Fair enough. I could relate. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the paper from BVI between my hands. The ink was slightly smudged from melted snow, but everything important was still readable. A meeting. Their main office. Morning. I leaned back, letting the heater thaw my legs. The day had started with the hope of family, and ended with an invitation from a stranger who somehow knew more about me than she should have. But the part that stayed with me wasn't the confusion. It was the certainty in her eyes when she asked for me by name. Whatever tomorrow held, it wasn't going to look anything like tonight. The cold in the motel room didn't leave my body right away, even with the heater rattling like it was fighting for its life. I felt it hanging on my shoulders and in my chest as I stepped into the lobby the next morning, gripping the paper from BVI like it might try to escape. The sky outside had that flat winter gray that makes noon look like dawn, and the sidewalks were lined with snow piles from the night cruise. Brighton Ridge was built for postcard moments, but the daylight made the whole place look like it was pretending a little too hard. I followed the address printed at the top of the paper, heading toward a part of town I'd never had a reason to visit before. The buildings shifted from boutique stores and holiday decorations to long, low brick structures that carried the look of older funding and newer paint. The sign for Brooks Veterans Initiative wasn't flashy. Dark blue, clean lettering, metal emblem. No flag outside, which told me immediately the person who ran this place didn't need to advertise credibility. Inside, the front lobby felt warmer than the motel, which wasn't saying much. A man behind the desk glanced up, took in my uniform, and offered the kind of nod two people give when they recognize a shared background without needing the details. "You're here for Evelyn," he said, not even checking a schedule. Apparently this wasn't as casual an invitation as I had assumed. He pointed down a hallway. "Office 3. She's expecting you." My boots squeaked on the tile as I walked. The building had that faint smell of coffee, disinfectant, and old carpet, basically the scent of every government-adjacent building I'd ever worked in. Office 3 had its door open. Inside, the woman from last night sat in a sturdy chair wearing warm clothes, slippers, and the coat I'd given her folded neatly across her lap. Her eyes were clearer than they'd been in the snow, sharp in a way that made me feel like I'd just been scanned for weapons and lies. I stopped in the doorway. "Didn't expect you to be up already." She smiled, small but genuine. "Takes more than a Colorado winter to break me." Her voice carried a strength that hadn't been there the night before. The tremor was gone. The clarity was back. She gestured toward the chair across from her. "Sit, soldier." Old habits kicked in. I sat. Back straight. Shoulders square. I didn't intend to do it. My body just defaulted to parade rest whenever someone said that word in that tone. She noticed. "You still snap to attention like you're waiting for inspection. It sticks with you," I said. "It should," she replied. "Means you didn't waste your time wearing the uniform." I looked at her closely now that I wasn't freezing to death. Her hair was pulled back into a loose braid. Her hands were weathered. Not from age but from use. The lines on her face were the kind that didn't form from smiling too much. Whatever she'd lived through hadn't been easy. She held out her hand. "Evelyn Brooks." I shook it. Her grip was strong. Stronger than I expected from someone who'd spent the night wandering barefoot on ice. Caroline Mercer. "I know," she said. "I asked the team to find you as soon as I was conscious enough to talk without sounding like a malfunctioning radio." I crossed my arms. Not out of defensiveness, but because the room was still cold enough to remind me I had given away my only coat. "How did you know my name?" "How did you know my name?" She leaned back in her chair like she had all the time in the world. "Because I saw your service patch before you wrapped me in that jacket. I've worked long enough with veterans to recognize who we've shaped and who we haven't. So you singled me out." "I identified potential," she corrected. "There's a difference." Her calm certainty made me feel like I'd walked into a briefing I hadn't prepared for. "Why ask to see me? Plenty of people probably help strangers." "There's helping," she said. "And there's what you did. You gave away the only barrier between you and hypothermia. Most people give what they won't miss. You gave what you needed." I didn't know what to do with that, so I didn't say anything. It wasn't heroism. It wasn't noble. It was instinct, drilled into me over years. If you see someone going down, you step in. She continued. "You're recently discharged. You're carrying things you don't want to talk about, and you've been told to take a break, which is code for, you're falling apart, try not to show it." Am I close? Am I close? Too close. Close enough to make me shift in my seat. Evelyn didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just nodded like a surgeon identifying a fracture. "You're not the first soldier I've met in that exact place. You won't be the last, but I can do something for you if you let me." "What is it you do here?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to the emblem on the wall. "I founded this organization 15 years ago. We help veterans transition into civilian life. Housing, job training, crisis support. We take the ones who fall between the cracks. And we train the ones who can lead." "Lead what?" And DESNO, programs, teams. Projects that keep people from ending up like I did last night. The sentence landed with the weight of a mortar shell. She wasn't exaggerating for effect. She meant every word. She touched the coat still folded on her lap. You saw me at my worst. Barefoot. Half frozen. Not exactly the picture of a retired officer. But I built this place. I've fought Congress for funding. I've pulled people out of addiction, homelessness, suicide, and I'm still at it. Even if my body likes to remind me I'm not 30 anymore. You were Army, I said. Colonel, she corrected. 31 years. Intelligence and logistics. That said enough. Colonels don't get there by accident. She leaned forward. Caroline, I want you to join our reintegration fellowship. I blinked. Why? Because you're exactly the kind of soldier who can do more good on this side of the battlefield. You have discipline, instinct, and the ability to act without overthinking when someone needs help. I saw it last night. I glanced at the windows, where sunlight pushed through a layer of frost. The world outside looked peaceful in the way things do when you're observing them from warmth. I didn't feel peaceful. I felt unsteady, like someone had moved the ground half an inch to the left. I don't know what I'm doing with my life yet, I said. Good, she answered. People who think they have everything figured out are usually useless in emergencies. I exhaled, not laughing but close to it. That sounds like something a colonel would say. Because it is. I rubbed my hands together, warming the last bits of cold from my skin. What does this fellowship actually involve? Training, she said. Structure, therapy, fieldwork with veterans who need someone who understands the terrain, and leadership development. If you commit, you'll come out of it with purpose again, a different kind than the Army gave you, but just as real. And if I don't commit? She shrugged once. Then you walk out of here, and life keeps happening to you instead of with you. Dixie Tan. I was a valibid and a vility. I looked at the coat she still held. She noticed and placed it gently on the chair beside her. You'll get it back when you accept the offer, she said. That's manipulation, I said. That's motivation, she countered. Only a colonel could deliver a line like that without blinking. I sat there for a long moment, listening to the hum of the building, feeling the weight of the night before fading into something more complicated than anger or hurt. Something closer to momentum. Evelyn watched with the patience of someone who'd waited out sandstorms and bureaucrats with the same expression. All right, I said finally. I'll hear the details. Ask. She nodded once, satisfied, and stood with steady legs that didn't match the barefoot woman I'd found in the snow. There was more strength in her posture than her appearance suggested. The kind Army training bakes in for life. Good, she said, because this isn't charity. It's a mission, one you're qualified for whether you believe it or not. I followed her out of the office, the hallway stretching ahead with an energy that felt different now. Not hopeful, exactly, but awake. Walking behind Evelyn through the narrow hallway, I felt that familiar tension across my shoulders, the one that shows up whenever I'm entering a space where people expect honesty without giving you a script. The reintegration fellowship occupied an entire wing of the building, and everything about it looked built for function over style. Metal tables, bulletin boards, with job postings, whiteboards covered in schedules. A few veterans around my age sat in a common area, drinking coffee from styrofoam cups and talking quietly. One of them glanced up and gave me the small, respectful nod you give someone who's clearly still adjusting to civilian gravity. Evelyn stopped outside a room with glass panes on 3 sides. Inside, a therapist sat across from a man in a wheelchair, both of them focused but calm. You'll get familiar with this room, she said. Not today, but soon. You can't lead anyone if you won't let someone steady your footing first. I didn't argue. There's no point arguing with someone who can see the cracks you're trying to pretend are decorative. She guided me to a small office with 2 chairs and a table stacked with paperwork. A woman in her 50s looked up as we entered. Short hair, soft voice, eyes that saw more than you said. She extended her hand. I'm Dr. Karen Miles. I run the clinical side of the fellowship, Caroline, I said, shaking her hand. She gestured to the chair. I've heard a little about you. Not enough to diagnose you on sight. So we'll have to do this the normal way. I have class today. Evelyn sat as well, though it was clear she planned to observe more than participate. Dr. Miles clicked her pen. Let's start with the basics. Sleep? I let out a slow breath. 3 hours. Maybe 4. Depends. Nightmares? Yes. Flashbacks? Yes. Triggers? I hesitated. Cold, loud bangs, sudden voices behind me. Hypervigilance? I check exits without thinking. She nodded like I'd just recited the alphabet. All standard. Guilt? I didn't answer right away, not because I was hiding it, but because the word itself covered too much terrain. There was guilt for surviving when others didn't, guilt for not being able to shake the images that came back without permission, guilt for standing outside my parents' door last night hoping for some version of comfort a 35-year-old should have stopped expecting. Yes, I said finally, on a scale of 1 to 10? Depends on the day, I said. Yesterday? 10. Dr. Miles wrote that down. Describe what happened to push you into discharge. I rubbed my thumb across the seam of my pants, grounding myself. It was a mission overseas. Routine surveillance op. Nothing flashy. 1 minute everything was normal. The next we were under fire. 2 teammates didn't make it out. I was the ranking intelligence officer. I made a call. A wrong one. Evelyn didn't flinch. She'd heard versions of this story more times than anyone should. Dr. Miles kept her voice steady. Did the investigation blame you? No. Do you blame you? Another breath. Yes. Why? Because they're not here, and I am. She nodded again, writing something on her clipboard. You're carrying survivor's guilt with a side order of responsibility distortion. Pretty common. Not easy, but treatable. That's comforting, I said, which earned me half a smile. I'm not here to comfort you. She said, I'm here to stabilize you. This fellowship is structured. You'll meet with me once a week. Group twice a week. Physical training 3 times a week. Fieldwork as assigned. It's Indris Tuda. I nodded, recognizing the cadence of a briefing. What's the goal? To get you out of survival mode, she said. Then to get you functioning. Then to get you leading. Not everyone makes it to step 3. But I have a feeling you will. Evelyn stood. She will. She just needs a direction. Dr. Miles closed the folder. Let's move to the next room. We followed her into a larger space set up for group therapy. 10 chairs, a box of tissues, a coffee pot that smelled like it had fought in a war of its own. A few veterans filed in, each carrying their own shadows. A Marine with a prosthetic leg. A Navy corpsman whose hands shook slightly. A young officer who looked too polished to be as tired as he was. Dr. Miles introduced me, though introductions aren't really needed among veterans. You can read someone's posture, their eyes, the way they scan the room. Trauma has its own language. Caroline's just joined the fellowship, she said. She's here to do the work. Same as all of you. The Marine gave me a nod. Army, right? Yeah. 14 years. That explains the posture, he said. A few chuckles drifted around the circle. It wasn't mocking, just recognition. Group began with a discussion about stability routines, sleep schedules, breathing exercises, techniques that sound simple until you actually try them with a brain wired for threat assessment. People shared stories, some filtered, some raw. No one asked for details. That wasn't the point. The point was connection without pressure. When it was my turn, I spoke without rehearsing. I wasn't planning to be here, I said. I thought I could just go home, get a grip, and figure things out. Turns out the place I thought was home doesn't exactly want to renew the lease. A few people nodded. Not out of pity, out of familiarity. I didn't elaborate. I didn't talk about Lydia filming me on the porch, or my dad's expression when he told me to leave, or how the cold felt sharper because of who pushed me into it. None of that needed to be said for them to understand the shape of the wound. After group, Evelyn met me in the hallway. You handled yourself well in there. I just answered questions. That's more than most do on the first day. I didn't disagree. It had taken everything I had not to fold into myself and pretend I was fine. She nodded toward the exit. You'll start work in the shelter tomorrow. Shadowing, mostly. See how things run. Get used to civilian chaos. It's different from military chaos. More paperwork, fewer grenades, and her delivery was dry enough to make me snort. Looking forward to the paperwork. You'll hate it, she said. Everyone does. The wind hit the building hard enough to rattle one of the windows. I pulled my borrowed jacket tighter around me, feeling the weight settle across my shoulders. The cold didn't sting the way it had the night before. My body was still adjusting, but something had shifted. Not resolved, just redirected. Evelyn watched me for a moment, assessing in that way only people trained to read a room do. "You did something important yesterday," she said. "Not the coat. Anyone can give away an object. You acted without hesitation when someone was in danger. That instinct can save lives." "It didn't save my team," I said. She shook her head once. Not dismissing me. Correcting me. "Instinct isn't magic. It's just readiness. Sometimes readiness isn't enough. That doesn't make it worthless." She walked away, not waiting for a response. That was another military habit. Deliver truth, let the soldier process on their own time. I stepped outside, snow crunching under my boots. The air was sharp but not unfriendly. My breath turned into clouds that drifted upward and vanished. I adjusted the strap of my duffel and started moving, each step steady, my body remembering how to move towards something instead of away from it. The shelter smelled like burnt coffee, wet boots, and too many space heaters fighting a losing battle. I'd barely stepped inside before 3 different conversations hit me at once. Someone arguing with a caseworker about paperwork, someone else trying to barter for another blanket, and a man near the corner loudly complaining about the thermostat like it owed him money. Civilian chaos, exactly like Evelyn promised. Not dangerous, just messy in a way that didn't follow any protocol my brain recognized. A staff member named Robert spotted me lingering near the entrance and waved me over. He looked mid-40s, sharp but tired around the eyes, the kind of tired that comes from caring a little too much for a little too long. "You're the army one," he said, as if that narrowed things down. "Come on, shadow me." We moved through the main floor as he explained the basics. Intake assessments, emergency support, documentation for the VA, crisis de-escalation. I listened, absorbing the flow of the place, noting exits and traffic patterns without meaning to. The army builds habits you carry forever, even when you're just walking through a shelter cafeteria where someone's trying to microwave spaghetti without removing the fork. Robert continued talking while he pulled a stack of forms from a filing cabinet. "Most folks here want help. Some want attention. A few want to fight. You'll learn which is which." "That last category familiar," I said. He cracked a small smile, figured. Before we could get further, a shout cut across the room, a man's voice, loud and sharp. It didn't sound angry at first, just panicked, but panic can pivot into something else quickly. I turned toward the sound, scanning instinctively. A veteran near the back wall was pacing in tight circles, breath fast, hands trembling. Early 40s, Marine haircut grown out, eyes wide in that way that's less about fear and more about being stuck inside a moment no one else can see. One of the volunteers spoke softly to him, hands up, palms out, but he wasn't processing anything. His gaze kept darting to the door like he needed to run, except he wasn't moving toward escape, he was spiraling inward. "Is he new?" I asked. "Came in last night," Robert said, already moving. "PTSD, service-connected. You comfortable handling this?" I wouldn't have shown up today otherwise. We approached slowly, careful with our pace. You don't rush someone in crisis unless you want the crisis to accelerate. I positioned myself at an angle, not blocking his exit, not closing him in. Just offering presence. His breathing picked up. His hands went to his head as if trying to press something back inside. "They're not listening, they don't hear, they think I made it up." "Hey," I said, keeping my tone steady but firm. "Look at me." He didn't, but he paused long enough to register the command. I stepped a little closer. "You're safe. No one here is a threat. They said they'd call the cops," he muttered. "No one's calling the cops," I said. "You're surrounded by veterans. You're not alone in this room." His eyes flicked toward my boots, then up to my shoulders. He noticed the way I stood. Recognition clicked behind his panic. It wasn't calm, just recognition. "You served," he said, voice shaking. "Yeah," I answered. 14 years. Intel support for Rangers. I've been where you are. Maybe not the exact same place, but close enough." He pressed a hand to his chest, trying to catch his breath. "They don't understand what it's like when it comes back at you. It just comes back." "I know," I said. "Your brain's firing the wrong signals. It thinks you're still in danger, but you're here. This is the real place. Focus on my voice. He swallowed hard. I can't stop seeing it. You don't need to stop it right now, I said. You just need to stay with me long enough to breathe. I don't leave ones and five. I lifted my hand, slow and deliberate. Not touching him, just giving him something to mirror. Match my pace. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Out. He tried once, shaky. Then again. Third time. His shoulders dropped half an inch. That's all I needed. Progress doesn't show up in dramatic breakthroughs. Sometimes it looks like a single breath that doesn't collapse. You're doing fine, I said. Keep going. The room around us quieted on its own, people instinctively giving space. Robert stood nearby but didn't intervene, reading my body language like someone who'd been around enough crisis situations to know not to clutter the air. The veteran's voice cracked as he spoke again. I lost my guys, my whole team. 1 minute we were joking and the next, you don't have to justify what you're feeling, I said. Loss rewires the brain. It doesn't care about rank or training. His hands lowered, slowly. The shaking eased. Not gone, but manageable. He blinked a few times, grounding himself. I thought I was losing it. You weren't, I said. You were overwhelmed. Happens to more of us than you think. He exhaled hard, shaky but present. The panic had retreated enough for the staff to gently guide him toward the quiet room, a small space where veterans could decompress with a counselor. As they walked him away, Robert let out a breath he'd been holding. Well, he said, that could have gone sideways. It didn't, I replied. That's because you stepped in exactly the way we needed. How'd you know he'd respond to you and not escalate? Training, I said. And because I've looked like that before. Robert gave a slow nod. You'll fit here better than you think. We moved on with the day's tasks, but that moment stuck with me longer than anything else. Not because it was dramatic. It wasn't. No Hollywood music. No heroic speeches. Just a man trying not to drown in his own memories and another veteran pulling him up long enough for him to breathe. Throughout the morning, I shadowed intake interviews, sorted supply donations, and sat with a few veterans waiting for mental health check-ins. Most didn't want conversations. They wanted presence, someone who wouldn't talk to them like a broken thing, someone who knew what silence meant without needing footnotes. At lunch, I sat with a small group eating chili that tasted like it had been cooked during the Korean War. One of the older veterans told a story about accidentally adopting a raccoon because he thought it was a cat with attitude issues. Nobody questioned it. In a room full of military experiences, a raccoon roommate barely cracked the top 50. Between tasks, I caught myself scanning the shelter again and again, not out of paranoia but awareness. I was learning faces, learning rhythms, learning how trauma changes the way people walk or sit or react to sudden noise. It wasn't the battlefield, but it wasn't gentle either. It demanded steadiness. By the time afternoon rolled in, my body felt tired in a different way, less from freezing weather, more from the mental load of staying present. But it wasn't the draining kind of tired. It was the kind that followed accomplishment, even if the accomplishment wasn't glamorous. Before leaving, I stopped at the office window overlooking the common area. Veterans moved through the space with a little more calm than earlier, the ripple effect of crisis resolved. Small victories don't draw headlines, but they stabilize the room. They stabilize you, too. As I stepped outside, the air felt colder than the building but warmer than the night before. My lungs expanded deeper, easier, and my boots left clean tracks in the snow as I crossed the lot. The sky was already shifting into late afternoon, the kind of blue-gray that asked whether you were done for the day or just beginning something else. The next morning, my body reminded me I wasn't 20 anymore. My back felt like it had signed its own discharge papers overnight, and my legs protested the cold the second I stepped outside. Even so, something in me moved faster than usual, like the day waiting for me had a shape I already recognized. The shelter work had hit a nerve, the kind that hurts in the exact way you need if you want to wake up again. At BVI headquarters, the building buzzed with early activity. Staff with clipboards, volunteers loading boxes of supplies, veterans heading to morning workshops. It felt like organized chaos, but at least it was organized. Compared to the military, it was practically spa-level relaxing. Evelyn appeared at the end of the hall wearing the same no-nonsense expression she always carried, as if the universe existed specifically to give her problems she could solve. Good, she said, eyeing me. You're early. People who show up early usually end up in charge. That sounds like a threat, I said. That sounds like your future. She turned and motioned for me to follow. Today you're sitting in on a program meeting. Don't speak unless you're asked. And when you're asked, don't ramble. You're Army. This shouldn't be hard. End quote. We walked into a conference room where staff members were gathered around a long table cluttered with files, coffee cups, and the kind of pastries that exist solely to look better than they taste. A projector displayed charts about housing capacity, funding cycles, and case backlog. It was bureaucratic, but the stakes weren't imaginary. Every line on the spreadsheet represented someone who needed help. The program director, a sharp woman named Lauren, with the energy of someone constantly 3 minutes ahead of everyone else, glanced at me. This the new fellow? Not a fellow, Evelyn said. A potential leader if she doesn't get in her own way. Lauren raised an eyebrow at me. So high potential, high risk. Pretty much, I said, taking a seat. The meeting kicked off too fast for anyone not used to processing multiple streams of information at once. Funding shortages in one district. A delay in medical referrals because a contractor messed up paperwork. 2 veterans who didn't show up to appointments and needed wellness checks. A housing partnership threatened to fall through over zoning regulations. Civilian problems, sure, but problems with teeth. I stayed quiet until Lauren pointed at me without warning. Caroline, Intel background, right? What would you do with this bottleneck in crisis case tracking? INICEF. She wasn't testing me to embarrass me. She was testing me to see if I could think on my feet. I looked at the graph. You're logging cases by date received, but not by severity. You're treating every incoming file like it weighs the same. It doesn't. If someone is flagged red for risk, they should be bumped automatically to the top of the list. I tapped the chart. Reorder your intake triage this way, and your backlog won't disappear, but the urgent cases won't drown in the pile. Lauren stared for 1 second, then nodded. She's right. Someone across the room muttered, "We've been saying that for months." And another staffer elbowed him. Lauren ignored both. The meeting rolled on, and every now and then she'd toss something my direction. I didn't overshare. I didn't lecture. I answered clean and concise, the way we were trained to give battlefield intel briefings before anyone had a chance to fall asleep or get shot. By the end, Lauren shut her notebook and looked at me. She learns fast. I like that. That's why she's here, Evelyn said. Her instincts are solid. She just needs structure. Lauren leaned back in her chair. Fine. Let's talk about next steps. Caroline, starting next week, I want you in the field team rotation. Crisis response, housing inspections, grant compliance checks. Jumping straight into the deep end, I said. Lauren shrugged. Sink or swim is how most of us got here. The room emptied, leaving me with Evelyn, who studied me like she was gauging how much pressure I could take before cracking. You handled yourself, she said. I didn't do much. You didn't freeze, she countered. People think leadership is about charisma. It's not. It's about making decisions while everyone else panics. You have that. Her confidence in me felt heavier than my duffel bag, but not in a bad way. More like responsibility handed over by someone who didn't waste time on flattery. She handed me a binder so thick it could be used as improvised armor. Read this. Case histories, operational protocols, risk assessments, and court. I flipped it open. There's enough paper here to rebuild a small forest. That's the nonprofit world. Bureaucracy in tactical form. I spent the afternoon shadowing Lauren's team. We toured the transitional housing facility, met with veterans preparing for job placements, and sat in on conflict mediation between 2 roommates, arguing about fridge space like it was a matter of national security. Turns out nothing brings out old combat instincts like someone stealing leftovers. What surprised me most wasn't how chaotic things could get, but how functional it all remained under the chaos. I could see the system, the part that worked, the part that dragged, and the part that needed someone willing to do more than kick the can down the hallway. Later, as we walked through the main office, Evelyn caught up with me. You're not overwhelmed, she observed, not asking. Should I be? Probably, but you're not wired for panic, you're wired for adaptation. I had good training, you had unusual training, she corrected. Intel soldiers see the whole board. They also tend to implode if left without a mission too long. That's supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be accurate. End quote. We passed a bulletin board filled with photos of veterans who'd completed the program, smiling faces, graduation certificates, job placement announcements, people who'd made it out of the worst parts of their lives because someone steadied them long enough to climb. You could help build something here, Evelyn said. Not just follow orders, build it. I didn't answer right away. Leaving the army had felt like stepping off a cliff without checking if a landing existed. This BVI, the chaos, the purpose, it was a landing I didn't expect. We reached the front lobby where the staff was closing out the day. A few veterans I'd seen earlier waved goodbye as they headed out. One of them, the Marine from yesterday's group session, stopped beside me. "Hey," he said, "heard you handled that crisis this morning." "I handled part of it," I said. "That's part more than most can handle." He nodded once and walked out. Simple acknowledgement, soldier to soldier. I stepped outside into the cooling air. The sky was shifting into evening, that pre-dusk blue that never commits to being night. The cold felt different today. Not kinder, but less personal. My boots crunched along the sidewalk as I headed back toward the motel. My mind replayed the day not to critique it, but to absorb it. I felt the shift in my posture, in my breathing, in the steady rhythm of my steps. The aimlessness that weighed on me the night on that frozen bench wasn't gone, but it had been pushed aside by something heavier, something useful. Purpose doesn't show up with trumpets. Sometimes it looks like a binder full of protocols and a veteran's hand finally stopping its shake. Sometimes it's just the knowledge that your instincts didn't die in the cold after all. I moved forward with that weight settling in just right, like gear that finally fit the way it should. I was halfway through reviewing a stack of case summaries the next morning when my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally I'd ignore it, but something about the area code made my stomach tighten. Brighton Ridge. I let it ring twice before answering, hoping I was wrong about whatever waited on the other end. The voice belonged to my mother, though it took me a second to place it because she didn't sound like herself. Her usual rehearsed calm was gone. "Caroline," she said, and my name cracked in the middle like it had to squeeze through a wall before reaching me. I didn't say anything, not out of spite. I just knew if I replied too quickly, the conversation would derail into her usual theatrics. She inhaled shakily. "We need to talk." I kept my tone flat. "About what?" "I have no this press." There was rustling in the background, maybe papers, maybe the sound of her trying to steady her breathing. "It's your father," she said. He's having problems. Legal problems." That explained the tone. My father didn't believe in problems, only inconveniences. Anything he couldn't control he denied existed until someone served paperwork. I waited. She continued. "The SEC opened an investigation. Something about an investment fund he put money into. They're saying it was fraudulent. They froze our accounts." Still, I didn't answer. Years of intel work had taught me that silence is underrated. It leaves the other person to fill the space with the truth they were trying to avoid. "And Lydia," she added, voice dropping even lower. "Her company is being audited. The IRS flagged some issues with their filings. They're calling it irregularities." "Irregularities," I repeated. "That's one word for it." She didn't argue. That alone told me plenty. Then came the quiet plea wrapped in faux dignity. "We need help." "We?" I asked. "Yes," she said, the words strained. "Your father, your sister, me. Things have become complicated." Complicated was another one of her favorite words, always used when the truth was too embarrassing to say out loud. Before I could ask why she was calling instead of Lydia, a door slammed somewhere near her, and another voice pushed into the line, my sister's, sharp as ever but with an edge I hadn't heard before. "Mom, stop sugarcoating it," Lydia snapped. "Just let me talk to her." A shuffle. My mother must have handed the phone off. Lydia wasted no time. "Caroline." "Hey." "So, things aren't great right now." Her attempt at nonchalance was laughable. I could practically hear her pacing. She pushed out a breath. "Look, the startup hit a rough patch. Some accounting issues popped up. Nothing criminal. Okay? Just messy. And now investors are panicking because the IRS stepped in. Dad's situation made everything worse. I let her talk. Not because I wanted to hear it. Because she needed me to. We lost the house, she said abruptly. Bank took it yesterday. Mom's staying with me for now, but I don't know how long we can make this work. Dad is... somewhere. I don't know. He won't answer his phone. Something in her voice wobbled. Not enough to be sympathy-worthy, but enough to be honest. Caroline, she said, we need money. There it was. The thesis statement of Mercer Family Communication. How much? I asked. Not a lot, she lied automatically. Just enough to stabilize things. Clear a few debts. Maybe help Mom get medical care. Her insurance lapsed and she cut herself off, as if saying the details out loud made them worse. And why call me? I said. Because you're doing well, she said defensively. You work at some veteran place. You have funding, grants, government support. You have access to things. I don't have personal access to anything, I said. Nonprofits don't hand out checks to employees' families. She huffed. That's not what I meant. A beat. We just thought you might know how to get help. Real help. Help. The same word they withheld from me so easily that night on the porch. It sat between us like a reminder neither of us wanted to acknowledge. Footsteps echoed down the hall behind me. I turned to see Lauren walk past, flipping through folders, completely unaware she'd just crossed the moment where my two worlds collided. I pressed the phone closer. Lydia, what exactly do you want from me? There was no hesitation this time. Money, connections, whatever you can do, we're desperate. She said the last part like it physically hurt her to admit it. You filmed me being kicked out of the house, I said. You laughed while I froze in the driveway. You called me a failure. You told your followers I was an embarrassment. That was different, she snapped. How? Silence short but revealing. Her voice softened, forced into sincerity. I'm sorry, okay? I know I was awful. I shouldn't have said those things. Can we not dig that up right now? She wanted forgiveness packaged neatly with cash and convenience. You want me to rescue you, I said. Yes, she whispered. We need you. Need. Another word that only came out of Lydia's mouth when her back was against a financial wall. My answer wasn't angry, just factual. I can't give you money. She inhaled sharply. What do you mean you can't? You work at a foundation. Which is exactly why I can't, I said. I can't use nonprofit funds for private financial bailouts. That's illegal. Oh my God, she groaned. I didn't ask for an ethics lecture. I asked for help. I can give you resources, debt counselors, legal aid, health support programs. We don't want programs, she snapped. We want stability. You want shortcuts, I corrected. Her voice cracked into anger. You're really going to sit there in your comfortable little job and pretend you're above us now? I didn't say that. You didn't have to, she shot back. You think because you crawled around in the desert for a few years, you get to act superior? 14 years. Not a few. But I didn't correct her. The point wasn't accuracy. It was the raw panic behind her words. If you won't help, she said, just say it. I am helping, I answered. Just not the way you want. She went quiet again. That heavy, loaded quiet when someone realizes the equation no longer works in their favor. When she spoke again, her tone was lower, almost defeated. So, that's it? No, I said. It's the beginning of you taking responsibility. Click. She hung up. I lowered the phone slowly, not because the call shook me, it didn't, but because everything it represented pressed into focus. The Mercer family had always operated on polished surfaces and denial, but denial cracks under pressure, and pressure doesn't care about holiday decor or Instagram followers. Across the lobby, a group of veterans entered, brushing snow off their jackets. One of them nodded toward me. Morning, Caroline. I won. Morning. I replied, slipping the phone into my pocket as if the conversation with Lydia were just another piece of static in the world. Evelyn's voice came from the side. That face tells me someone asked you for something unreasonable. Family, I said. She nodded once. Ah, the original chain of command. Her tone wasn't mocking, just knowing, maybe too knowing. I didn't elaborate, didn't need to. The world inside BVI ran on clarity and action. The world I came from, my family world, ran on pressure, guilt, and selective memory. Two different landscapes, one I chose, one I survived. Evelyn didn't pry. She simply handed me a clipboard. "We have a busy day," asked. I took it, feeling the weight of both the job and the call merging into one long breath I didn't let out all at once. The room around me continued moving. Voices, footsteps, purpose, a rhythm I understood, and I stepped into it without hesitation. The lobby buzzed with the usual morning rush, but my head was still carrying the aftershocks of Lydia's call. I tried to shake it off the way I used to shake dust off my uniform, quick, efficient, done, but nothing about family ever brushes off that cleanly. Still, BVI didn't slow down just because someone's personal life went sideways, and honestly, that was part of what kept me grounded. Chaos with a mission beats chaos without one. Lauren intercepted me halfway down the hall, a stack of folders in her arms. "Housing inspection in 20. She said, and after that, a compliance walkthrough with the city rep. "Wear something that won't scare them." "I'm in clean boots," I said. "That's the best I can do." "Fair enough," she replied, already moving on to her next task. The rest of the morning ran like a series of drills. Check the condition of a transitional housing unit, review fire safety, make sure one tenant understood that no pets included the snake he claimed was an emotional support reptile, file reports, update logs, answer questions, move, assess, repeat. The rhythm of it muted the lingering frustration Lydia had stirred up, but nothing stays muted long around here. Around noon, my phone buzzed again, not a call this time, just a series of notifications lighting up the screen. Mentions, messages, people forwarding links. A sinking feeling hit me. The kind that comes right before an explosion you didn't see on the drone footage. I opened one of the messages from a former teammate. It was a link to a video, Lydia's face front and center, looking like she'd taken a crash course in victim theater. Her voice trembled on cue. "My sister works with all this government money now," she said. "But she won't even help her own family. She left us to lose everything." Perfect. She'd gone public. I clicked another link. Same clip, different platform. Someone added a dramatic caption. "Soldier abandons her struggling family." Because the internet never met a nuance, it didn't immediately delete. Lauren walked by, saw the look on my face, and doubled back. "Trouble?" "Family," I said, holding up the phone. She rolled her eyes. "It's always family." Before I could respond, another notification popped up. Someone had stitched Lydia's video with footage from the night I'd been kicked out. Yes, she had actually posted that. And yes, someone had kept it. Lydia's smug grin from that night filled the screen. The caption read, "Funny how karma takes the scenic route but still arrives." I didn't feel anger so much as a tired sort of clarity. Years in intel had trained me to watch patterns, and Lydia's pattern was always the same: escalate, blame, collapse, repeat. But the internet had a sharper memory than she realized. A third notification pinged. Someone had dug up comments she wrote years ago mocking my deployments. Another clip surfaced where she joked about me playing soldier in the desert. Then another showing her live streaming as I dragged my duffel bag through the snow. Public opinion shifted faster than a weather front. What started as pity for her turned into collective outrage. And not the lukewarm kind. Internet outrage, the kind with teeth. Lauren leaned closer. "You need us to issue a statement?" "No," I said. "Let it burn out on its own." "You sure? Because your sister looks very committed to her meltdown." I locked the screen. She always is. By the time the afternoon meeting rolled around, half the office had already seen the video. Not because they were gossiping, they just moved fast. Crisis response wasn't just for veterans, it was for staff dealing with unexpected bombs dropped into their lives. Evelyn pulled me aside before the meeting started. She didn't look surprised. She didn't even look annoyed. She looked like someone who had anticipated this exact moment down to the second. "She went public," Evelyn said, confirming what she already knew I knew. "She did. And the internet turned on her." "It did." Evelyn gave a thoughtful nod. "Well, that's the problem with broadcasting cruelty. Eventually, it plays back." Her voice carried no judgment, only observation. She'd seen enough human behavior, good and bad, to diagnose patterns without emotional detours. "It'll blow over," I said. "It will," she agreed. "But not because you defend yourself. Because you don't need to." Her phrasing wasn't flattery. She meant it tactically. When you hold your position, you force others to reveal theirs. The meeting started, and we moved through agenda items, grant cycles, staffing shortages, upcoming deadlines. My phone buzzed twice, then fell silent again. Whoever was tagging me had apparently moved on to tagging Lydia instead. We stepped out of the meeting around 3. I headed toward the back wing of the office to oversee intake updates. A veteran stood near the bulletin board, scrolling his phone with an expression halfway between amusement and disbelief. He looked up when he saw me. "Hey," he said, "your sister's on fire online." "Unfortunately," I said, "she enjoys the attention even when she shouldn't." "Not this kind," he said. "Someone just posted her old live stream. The one where she filmed you in the snow. People are not loving her." His tone wasn't malicious, just factual. Soldiers don't sugarcoat. They report conditions. I let out a short breath. "Well, actions have consequences." "Yeah," he said. "And you handled that crisis this week, so you're good in my book." Internet agrees. He walked off, leaving me with the odd sensation of relief and fatigue layered together. Near the end of the day, Lydia texted me. Not a paragraph, not a guilt trip, just 2 words. "Fix this." No punctuation. No explanation. Just the expectation that I'd jump in and restore her image the way she'd always assumed I could. I typed 1 sentence in return. "No." Sent it. Locked the screen. That was it. No theatrics. No big monologue. Just a boundary held in place the same way you hold a perimeter. Firm, simple, non-negotiable. When I stepped outside into the late afternoon light, the air felt colder than the morning but sharper in a way that woke me up instead of dragging me down. A few flakes fell from the sky, soft and quiet, settling on the ground like nothing unusual was happening anywhere. The day around me moved with its own rhythm, cars passing, people heading home, someone at the corner yelling at a parking meter they believed wronged them. Just normal life unfolding while my family's online implosion continued in the background. My boots pressed into the snow as I walked, leaving steady tracks that disappeared behind me almost as fast as they formed. Nothing in the path ahead required explanation. Nothing behind me required revisiting. The world kept its pace, and so did I. The morning of the campus launch hit me with the same jolt I used to get before a major operation. Not fear, just the sharp awareness that everyone was moving toward a single objective and there were no do-overs. BVI headquarters was buzzing harder than usual. Staff rushed between rooms carrying clipboards, cables, banners, and boxes of brochures. City officials would be arriving. Donors. Veterans from every corner of the state. A few reporters who loved sniffing around anything that hinted at government partnerships. The energy wasn't chaotic. It was alive. Evelyn stood in the main hallway, giving directives like she was orchestrating a battalion. She didn't raise her voice. She never had to. People moved because she spoke. When her eyes landed on me, she gave a single approving nod, the kind that meant, "You're exactly where I expected you to be." "Your notes ready?" she asked. "As ready as they're going to be," I said. She smirked. "Good. Bad speeches are usually the ones that sound rehearsed." Lauren joined us, carrying a folder thick enough to be used as emergency armor. "We've got the governor's office requesting front row seating," she said. "Press wants 2 minutes with you afterward." "That's not happening," I said without hesitation. "Say that again after you read the email chain," she replied. Already speed-walking toward the event tent, I followed the stream of volunteers outside. The new Veterans Transition Campus sprawled across several acres, a central building for training, a medical wing, a housing block for transitional residents, and a courtyard where the ceremony would take place. Flags lined the walkway in even rows, fluttering lightly in the cold air. Seeing it all assembled hit a place in me I didn't have a name for. I'd seen a lot of structures built under pressure, forward operating bases, command tents, but nothing like this. This wasn't built to fight a war. It was built to stop the casualties after it. Staff, veterans, and guests filled the courtyard. A low murmur of conversation moved through the crowd as chairs scraped, cameras clicked, and a brass quintet tested microphones near the podium. The governor's team arrived with practiced smiles. Donors took selfies with the building behind them, creating the perfect look of "I care about society" lighting. I stood off to the side, reviewing my speech, not the words, but the intention behind them. I wanted it clean, steady, without theatrics. This campus wasn't about inspiration. It was about function and survival. When the event coordinator called my name, I stepped forward. People quieted on instinct. Years of military training taught me to walk like I knew where I was going, even if my stomach was busy studying escape strategies. Up close, the crowd was bigger than I expected. Hundreds. Faces I didn't recognize, and a few I did veterans from the fellowship groups, case managers, city officials, reporters, and beyond them, near the far end of the seating area, stood three familiar silhouettes. My mother. My father. Lydia. They hadn't been invited. That fact alone said everything about why they were here. They didn't wave. They didn't shout. They just watched, hoping their eyes could bridge a gap they'd spent decades widening. But they had no power here. For once, their presence wasn't the center of the room. They were just three people who showed up late to a story they thought still revolved around them. I turned toward the microphone. "Thank you all for being here today," I began. "This campus isn't the start of something new. It's the continuation of something overdue." My voice landed clean, carrying through the speakers without quiver or hesitation. Not confidence. Just clarity. When service members come home, people like to say, "Thank you for your service," and expect that phrase to patch over the parts they'd rather not think about. But service doesn't end because the uniform comes off. The impact doesn't end. The trauma doesn't end. And too often, the support ends long before it should. Some heads nodded. Others stiffened the way people do when truth bumps into their comfort zone. This campus exists for veterans who don't fit the brochure version of reintegration, the ones who come home and fall apart quietly, the ones who need housing, treatment, training, community, the ones who deserve stability as much as anyone who never wore the uniform. No theatrics, no grand gestures, just plain language. I continued. And I stand here today because of people who refused to let me disappear into every gap I fell through. People who steadied me long enough that I could figure out how to stand on my own. In the corner of my vision, Lydia shifted, like the words were brushing up against her. She didn't know what version of herself she wanted to inhabit: angry sister, guilty sister, or the one who pretended none of this involved her. But support, I said, isn't about fixing people. It's about building systems that don't require heroics every time someone falls. That's what this campus represents. Not a miracle, a structure. One built by people who know what it feels like when the world narrows to a single cold night and the wrong door closes in your face. That line moved through the crowd like a slow, steady wave. Not dramatic, but undeniable. And for the veterans who will walk through these doors, I hope this campus gives something simple. A place to breathe. A place to rebuild. A place that doesn't demand they pretend everything is fine. I paused, letting the air settle before adding the last piece. You are not disposable. You are not alone. And you don't have to earn your place here. The brass quintet started its cue. People applauded first, scattered, then unified. Some stood, not for me, but for the idea of what the campus meant. I stepped back from the podium, not needing to look toward the back row where my family stood. They weren't part of the structure, the mission, or the future. They were debris from a past life that had already burned itself down without my help. On the platform, Lauren handed me a folder containing the campus certification. Reporters angled forward, trying to catch a shot. Veterans lined up to shake hands with staff. The governor's aide gestured toward an area for photos, but I let others handle the spotlight. I stepped off the stage, the applause thinning into regular conversation again. Boots on concrete, winter air brushing against my face, the hum of people settling into the next part of their day. The world didn't pause, it absorbed the moment and continued forward, the same way soldiers learn to. And that movement, steady and unbroken, was enough. The applause faded into a low hum of conversation as people drifted across the courtyard, shaking hands, grabbing coffee, and posing for photos under the campus banner. I stepped away from the crowd, letting the cold air settle into my lungs. It felt cleaner than anything I'd breathed in months. Not warm, not comfortable, just honest. The kind of air that didn't care who deserved what, and didn't pretend it owed anyone a gentle landing. A few veterans stopped me along the walkway with simple nods or brief thanks. Nothing long, nothing dramatic. That was the thing about military people, we can say a whole paragraph with one nod if the angle's right. I nodded back, feeling the steadiness in their eyes mirror something settling in me. I caught the shape of Evelyn moving across the courtyard, walking with that slow, deliberate stride she used when she wanted to look like she wasn't checking on everything but absolutely was. She joined me without ceremony, her gaze fixed on the buildings. "Not bad," she said. "High praise," I answered. She crossed her arms. "You did what needed to be done, the rest is noise." Coming from her, that was practically a love letter. She glanced over her shoulder toward the back of the crowd. "Your family showed up," I noticed. "You didn't go to them." "I wasn't required to," I said. "Good," she replied, her voice steady. "Contact isn't closure, action is." She didn't need to elaborate, and I didn't need to explain my silence toward them. Some relationships don't end with a blowout argument or a grand finale, they end quietly, the moment you stop giving them the power to injure you. A staff member called for Evelyn, and she walked off with a quick tap to my shoulder, something between a pat and a reminder to stay upright. I watched her go, a small shape swallowed by a large mission, and felt that familiar mix of admiration and gratitude hit in a way I couldn't disguise. I headed inside the main building to check the final setup in the training wing. The room smelled faintly of new carpet and fresh paint. Rows of desks waited for the first cohort of veterans who'd start classes next month. Job training materials lined the back wall. Whiteboards displayed goals, intake protocols, and schedules with enough color-coded tabs to impress a drill sergeant. Walking through the space, I felt the weight of the last few years settle not as a burden, but as evidence. Evidence that the worst parts of my story hadn't been a dead end. They had been raw materials, awkward to hold, painful to carry, but capable of being built into something. I paused near a room where a maintenance worker was adjusting a thermostat. He gave a small nod as I passed. It struck me how ordinary everything looked, and how extraordinary it felt to stand in a place that existed because enough people refused to quit. When I stepped back outside, the crowd had thinned. A group of donors boarded a shuttle. The brass quintet packed their equipment. Volunteers collected folding chairs. And off to the side near the campus gate, my family lingered like they weren't sure if they were allowed to cross a threshold. My father looked older than I remembered, his posture bent a little, his coat 2 sizes too big. My mother held a paper cup with both hands like she was afraid it might vanish. Lydia stood between them, arms crossed, face tight, eyes bouncing around for a safe place to land. They saw me the moment I saw them. My father's mouth opened slightly, like he wanted to call my name but had misplaced the part of himself that knew how to start. My mother's chin trembled for a brief moment she tried to hide, and Lydia, normally the first to perform, looked like she'd run out of scripts. I didn't speed up or slow down as I approached, just walked the same pace I would if they weren't there. My mother stepped forward half an inch, then froze. My father swallowed hard, weighing his words and coming up empty. Lydia shifted her weight like she wanted to pick a tone, angry, apologetic, sarcastic, but none of them fit the room anymore. "Caroline," my mother finally said, barely above a whisper. I met her eyes. Not with anger, not with softness, just acknowledgement. A clean line drawn through years of confusion. Dad tried next, voice rough. "We're proud of you." And right. It was the kind of phrase people offer when they want to repair something without using tools. I nodded once. All right. Not acceptance. Not rejection. Just acknowledgement of a sentence they needed to say more than I needed to hear. Lydia looked at me then, her face stripped of every expression she'd learned to perform online. When she spoke, her voice lacked the usual sugarcoat or venom. "I didn't expect all of this," she said, motioning vaguely toward the campus. "Neither did I said. There was no cinematic swell, no emotional flashback montage, no tearful reconciliation, just 3 people standing in front of a boundary they couldn't cross anymore, and one person who finally understood why that boundary needed to exist. I adjusted the folder under my arm. "Take care of yourselves." My mother nodded rapidly, like she wasn't sure whether permission was being granted or revoked. My father stepped aside instinctively, giving me space to walk. Lydia lowered her eyes, maybe in regret, maybe in exhaustion. Without another word, I moved past them. The walkway stretched ahead, lit by the pale winter sun, and the air felt sharper in a way that made everything more precise. I didn't check to see if they watched me go. Their part in the story didn't need rewinding or revisiting. It simply existed where it belonged behind me. A little boy stood near the courtyard fountain, tugging at his father's sleeve while staring at the new campus. His father knelt to explain something about the building. The boy didn't wait for the full story. He spotted me, beamed, and held up a dandelion he'd found in a patch of stubborn grass. "For you," he said. I took it carefully. Thanks. It's perfect. He ran back to his father without waiting for anything else. Kids tend to give without agenda. Adults should try it sometime. The wind pushed lightly through the courtyard, carrying voices, footsteps, and the hum of a place that was now officially alive. I slipped the dandelion into my coat pocket and walked toward the entrance of the main building. The automatic doors opened with a soft whoosh, warm air spilling out to meet the cold. Inside, I could hear distant laughter, the scrape of chairs, the click of someone typing notes into a system that would chart the next chapter of someone else's recovery. I moved forward into that sound without looking back.